Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 15 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast. This week's interview is with veteran indie film maven and CEO of CreativeFuture.org, Ruth Vitale. Ruth's organization helps artists in the battle protect their work against cyber thieves. It's a tough job and it's getting tougher every day. But she's there in the trenches, working with both sides of the aisle to get it done. And speaking of indie films, I wanted to take a moment to address independent filmmaking circa 2017. Now, I don't like to disagree with Cartman. He's kind of one of the, maybe if not the greatest speakers of our age, but indie movies are more than just gay cowboys eating pudding. Much more. Now, this image still persists, though, and there's a reason why Cartman's joke kind of hit home for some people. Indie films can be a little bit too quirky. They can be too detached from the realities that we face every day. And frankly, some are just too artsy-fartsy. And, there's a little bit of truth in that as well, but obviously it's a stereotype, it's a label, and it doesn't apply across the board. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the independent filmmakers I've met along the way, and one of them jumps to mind immediately. Aaron Schneider, he's the director of Get Low, and that film had a couple of lesser-known stars, Bill Murray and Robert Duvall. You think, hey, when you get those guys attached to your film, it's a breeze, right? No, it wasn't a breeze. And frankly, Schneider's story to me is the same one I've heard from independent filmmaker after independent filmmaker. It's hard to make these films, to get the money, to get the stars attached, to get all the sort of funding that's needed from the beginning to the end. And it seems like in every other case, the movies almost didn't happen. So I'm sure there are a lot of films that frankly never get seen that could have been made, and maybe they would have been pretty darn good, but just failed along the way. There's a lot of roadblocks facing these filmmakers, and even when you get the biggest stars attached, it's not a guarantee. And why is that? Well, money's a clear example. They don't have the marketing muscle of the big boys, the studio films. And frankly, there's no built-in audience here. I mean, there's a reason why we're seeing movies based on video games and other properties like that, because it makes sense, because there's a familiarity factor there. And independent films, more often than not, don't have that. And so it's a real uphill battle just to get noticed, let alone make some money. Now, there are some good things about VOD today, about independent films today. It is VOD. It's video on demand. Now, here in Denver, I can see a lot of good movies, a lot of independent films that other people in other parts of the country just can't. We've got great independent filmmaking here. We've got great art houses. So if there's a new film that's kind of independent, well, there's a good chance I'll be able to see it if I want to. But now with video on demand, it's just great. I mean, we're not just talking Comcast, one of the major cable providers. It's Amazon Prime, other services as well. You could watch these movies for about $6 to $9. And that's just one price rather than kind of paying ticket after ticket. Now, the numbers behind these films are a little bit fuzzy. I don't feel like that we get a lot of sort of box office results based on the video on demand services. So it's a little unclear how well they're kind of keeping these independent films afloat. But I'm sure it's helping, and I'm sure it's another valuable revenue stream. So good for them. But, I guess it all boils down to this bottom question. Why do we care? Why should we care about independent filmmaking? Now, obviously, some of the independent films get Oscar nominations, and some of them are pretty darn good. But also, if you love your blockbusters, you better love independent films, because that's often where these directors come from. It's kind of like the farm system for the big leagues. Look at John Watts, not exactly a household name, but you know what? He's directing Spider-Man Homecoming, which comes out later this year. And then you look at Jurassic World, one of the biggest hits of the last 10 years. That's Colin Trevorrow. He got his work, this beginning of his career in the indie trenches. Now he's making blockbusters. He did a pretty good job of it too. So if you're not sort of familiar with independent films, or even if you're a little sketchy about them, maybe you want to check them out. These are where maybe the next big voices are coming from. And I think it's a smart way to kind of check out films. And it's low risk, not paying $40, $50 just to see it in the theater, but little video on demand action, you're good to go. Another reason why these movies are actually important, frankly, is the studios. When it comes to a big studio, they've got $100 to $200 million sunk into the budget alone. That doesn't even count the marketing, but these films are smaller, and the artists get the chance to have their say. He or she could make the movie that they want, and they don't have to get those studio notes, those dreaded studio notes, and saying, hey, do this, do that, include this, cut that. The true artistic vision, for better or worse, gets included. And also that means they can take more chances with a storytelling, maybe be a little bit edgier. If it's a rom-com, it doesn't have to end with every other character pairing up with someone in the final 10 minutes. Boy, that drives me nuts. I hate to see that. It just seems so cloying. But if you're watching an independent film that's a rom-com, chances are you might have a realistic ending. Doesn't mean it's a bad ending. Might be a bit bittersweet, but chances are it's going to relate to reality more than other things you've seen before. So overall, give independent films a chance and give them some love where they're good. And by that, I mean, check out video on demand, check out those services. And if you like a film, go crazy on social media. Tell people about it. Every independent film needs a little extra love if it's worthy. Spread the word. Word of mouth still matters today. Often, sometimes more than ever, just because that single tweet can kind of get ricocheted around social media quite nicely. So, independent films, give them a chance. Now, I want to take a moment to just have a quick plug for HollywoodInToto.com. Got a lot of traffic this week for a new feature with a pretty provocative question. Will conservatives punish Hollywood for its left-of-center views? Now, Hollywood's been left-of-center for quite some time. That's not exactly a breaking news item, but the last few months or so, it has been intense, and it has been ugly, frankly. And I'm hearing a lot of anecdotal evidence saying, hey, guess what? I'm not supporting Meryl Streep movies anymore, just to give you one example. So what's going to happen? Does this matter at all? Is it going to impact the bottom line? Hollywood still has left-of-center folks who will line up and be happy as a clam doing so. What will the impact be? So I reached out to a few interesting folks, Joel Pollack from Breitbart.com, John Nolte from the Daily Wire, author Sarah Hoyt, and some others as well, and kind of asked them the question. So check it out on the website, HollywoodInToto.com. You'll see it there, and see what you think. Leave a comment. Are you impacted by these politics? Do you not care? Do you kind of push it aside and say, hey, listen, they're politics of their own. I still love the movies. I want to check it out. Or maybe I'm sick of it in my face, and I'm done. So let me know. I'm curious to see what you think. Now, of course, there's the HiT tip of the week. And this one is not a raving recommendation, but it sort of has a little bit of a curiosity factor. It's the new to Blu-ray release of Scavenger Hunt. And sadly, I've been waiting for this one for a long time. It's a late 1979 movie that has a gaggle of stars. Kind of familiar faces back then. Maybe not big names, never were A-listers really, but I happen to like Roddy McDowell, James Coco, and some of the other people featured here. Of course, Richard Benjamin and Cloris Leachman as well. It's a story about a bunch of people who are scrambling to solve this scavenger hunt, because if they win, they get millions of dollars. Now, this is the kind of movie I watched about a dozen times, maybe more as a kid. And then watching it today, I remembered half the lines. It's kind of scary. But you know what? It was much funnier when I was a kid. It's pretty crude at times. I don't mean raw or gross, but just sort of rough around the edges. And frankly, it's kind of typical of comedy in that era. The jokes are broad, the acting is broad, the dialogue is sort of corny at times. But you know what? I still got some laughs out of it. And the cast is really funny and really sharp. So get a chance, check it out. If it's only just a trip down memory lane like it was for me, I think it'd be worth it. But I think you'll get some laughs here, and it's just a way to kind of revisit a property that maybe didn't get enough love the first time around. And I have to say, if you're looking for it's a mad, 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 mad world, this is not it. Maybe it's second cousin, maybe it's third cousin, but I still got a couple chuckles and made me feel like a kid again for a while, so that ain't bad. Now let's get to this week's interview. Ruth Vitale is the founder and president of Paramount Classics and the president of Fine Line Features. She was a really key player in the indie circles for quite some time, and during that time, she nurtured major talents like Paul Greengrass, Scott Hicks, and Sofia Coppola, and many more, frankly. Now she's the CEO of Creative Future. It's an organization that protects artists from having their work swiped by cyber pirates. The stakes are huge. There's going to be a whole bunch of information on the show notes just detailing how this impacts not just the artists themselves, but our economy as a whole. It's a big deal and it deserves more attention. I got a chance to speak to Ruth a couple of years ago. She was in town in Denver giving a speech, and just the speech blew my socks off. She's a really smart, interesting person, really speaks off the cuff. And I think for a Hollywood player, she's a little bit more blunt than most, not speaking in sound bites. I really enjoyed that part of her. So I think you'll see that come through loud and clear in our conversation. So here's my chance to check in with Ruth Vitale and Creative Future. Let's start with, obviously, Creative Future. I wanted to get sort of a kind of state of the union type of message from you, how the organization is growing in recent years and looking briefly ahead to 2017.
So we relaunched as Creative Future. Just want to give you a little bit of background. We relaunched in February of 2014, and at the time we had 65 organizations and thousands of members. I don't really know how many actually. being founded by 10 original members, right? So we're now at about 491 or 2 organizations and companies and over 110,000 members. So we've grown substantially. The industries that, so far we can tell, our members are from are film, television, music, book publishing, and photography. Mm-hmm. And I think there's also a lot of people who may not be in the industry themselves, but support the creative industries, because they're fans of entertainment and they're audience supporters. And so I can't give you a bigger, kind of description of the cross-section of members. But so we've, over the last couple of years, initiated engaging our creative members in the dialogue about the value of creativity and the value of copyright protection. We have a campaign called Follow the Money, where we work with the advertising community to get legitimate brands off of pirate sites. And we have a youth outreach campaign, which we've helped develop. We didn't develop it personally. We helped financially develop the curriculum for kids K through 12 about ethical behavior and digital citizenship. And we work with other organizations to get it into schools because it's free to schools. And we also have what we call our fourth initiative is essentially just Stand Creative, which is to communicate with the world about all the different things that go into making movies and books and television and music, so that we kind of lift the veil or the curtain on movie magic and all the magic that goes into any sort of entertainment, so that, we talk about all the different kinds of jobs. I think that our emphasis is on the fact that the core copyright industries are responsible for $1.2 trillion to the U.S. economy and 5.5 million jobs, so that it is an important segment of this country.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be minimized. So the coming year, we will do more of that. We will work with all different kinds of communities on the set-top boxes that are sold that can be uploaded with pirate apps can be uploaded to it. We want to figure out how to both educate and reach out to audiences about the fact that although those things may seem easy, it in fact hurts jobs, the economy,
mm-hmm.
and people's livelihoods.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably this year, and that feels like an awful lot.
Yeah, it does sound that way. You supplied me with a bunch of interesting data points about just how the economy is affected, and in the show notes I'll have some of that in there as well. But you also, we've talked briefly before about how independent films suffer from content stealing. And I think you mentioned in the past, this is a great example of the Dallas Buyers Club film, which we think of as a big hit. Matthew McConaughey won Best Actor for it. And yet a movie like that, I think, is very typical of how content stealing can impact the bottom line. So can you just share a little bit about that story? Because I think that really hammers it home.
Yeah, so, it's interesting because I think when people say, oh, I don't need to pay for content, it's big studios, right? And our response is, you're not hurting. It's not corporations against corporations. These are individual storytellers, okay, be they in film or television, books or music or photography, but let's take Dallas Buyers Club. Dallas Buyers Club was a movie that was made it was very little budget. I don't even know. It might have been $5 million. I'm not really sure. But everybody did it as a labor of love. And when the movie came out theatrically all over the world, it sold 7 million theatrical tickets. The average movie ticket price is about $7 and small change around the world, so the box office around the world was $50 million, which was for an independent film with that subject matter was like a pretty big deal, and as you said, he won, the Academy Award. During that time, and a little bit longer than the theatrical window, which is when the movie plays around the world, there were 22 million illegal downloads. Now, there are people that we have heard say to me, to my face, well, those 22 million people are tastemakers. Mm-hmm. And, you kind of look at them and you think, did you really just say that? And we had this conversation. It was a private dinner, and one of the producers of Dallas Buyers Club was there, and he literally looked at me like, really? Did he just say that? And I was like, let me handle this. And so I said, I don't believe that there were 22 million tastemakers, but ostensibly, let's say there are 22 million people who illegally downloaded it who are tastemakers. I'm pretty sure that they probably pointed other people to illegal links and not to the legitimate links, right?
Yeah.
And I said, and I think that your argument for the most part is one that I really don't even want to dignify you with a response, but let's say that you're right. Let's say that the majority of those people are tastemakers. Let's say that 95% of those people would never have bought it legally, but they did some taste making. But let's say that 5% of those people, okay, if they couldn't have gotten it from a pirate site, would have actually purchased it, for rent or for purchase. Let's say those people did it at about $3 a transaction, which is not, it's around there, $2.99, right? If you buy, it's a little bit more. So that's 1.1 million transactions at $3. That's $3.3 million. There is not an independent filmmaker in the world that wouldn't say that is life or death for their film.
Yeah, and most films in the independent realm don't make $1 million, let alone that kind of cash. So that's a significant amount of money.
And so what that means is that those people that worked for nothing were hoping for a back end, which is after the movie paid off and you paid them, you paid back your investors. That money coming in is to pay people extra for the work they did, cheaply at the up front. And that's the problem. For me, the problem is you can say that you're stealing from corporations, but you're not. You're stealing from, you're taking money away from people who look to our business for a livelihood, to put food on the table for their families, to educate their kids, to make a living, which is what everybody wants to do.
Yeah.
The second part of that that's interesting for me is that where do you get the next generation of voices? If that first generation of voices, the first independent film that an independent filmmaker makes, the first song that a musician makes, if they're stolen and they don't make any money, how do they then go on and make the next song or the next movie or write the next book?
Yeah.
That becomes the problem. So I can speak about it from the film business, obviously, Christian, because I'm from the film business. So, where does the next Catherine Bigelow come from, who did Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30? Thanks. And who is the next James Gunn, who did Guardians of the Galaxy? Who's the next Steve Soderbergh, who's one of our truly great independent voices, who goes from doing independent films to the Ocean's 11 series? So I mourn for the possibility of the next electric, passionate voice that may not have the opportunity because piracy hurt them the first time around.
Yeah, they may just give up on their dream and go to a more conventional job and let their voice be silenced, frankly.
Yeah, no, and the honest God truth is, you think about it, like, I was pre-med in college, right? And my father was a doctor, and I changed my major from pre-med to literature after about 6 weeks because I was sitting in chemistry class at Tufts, and I thought, I'm never gonna make it. Never in 1,000 years am I gonna make it. And my father, who was a very open-minded liberal guy, was like, "You're leaving pre-med to take a major in literature? Why don't you just have a basket weaving course as well?" And you think that's what people think about art. If you go back centuries, right, art needed patrons because nobody ever really looked at it, I don't think, as a legitimate choice for making a living. And it's just simply not true. It's the connective tissue for this planet. It's what makes us more than just machines. It's the cultural fabric of the planet. I would find this world to be a very stark place if there was no creativity.
Yeah, I mean, think about the conversations we have on a day-to-day basis with our closest friends. It's the TV show we can't stop binge watching. It's the music that we, are sort of just ricocheting in our heads. That's just who we are. So I get that. I think when you think about illegally downloading content, my first image is millennials. I was on a movie ticket line once, and I heard some people, younger people behind me, they were talking about, hey, we downloaded this, we downloaded that illegally, and yet they're online for a movie. So I get that there's some crossover, but it's not just millennials doing it. It's not just younger people. And I just thought you could maybe address sort of that. I think that's a misnomer that it's the young folks doing it.
It isn't. Maybe I should make my Uncle Pat famous for all time. My Uncle Pat is 91 years old. He lives on Cape Cod, and I'm from Massachusetts, and he sent me an email this summer saying that he was, I think it's a Tony Bennett song. No, but maybe it was a Bobby Darin song. And he was like, I love this song. And, I listened to 3 versions. I listened to Tony Bennett's and Bobby Darin's, but I love Kevin Spacey's the best. And in the email it said, but I did everything that I know you wouldn't want me to do. I'm sorry. And I literally was like, I don't even know what that means. So I pick up the phone and I call him and I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, I illegally downloaded the songs from YouTube. And I said, and you know what I do for a living. I know, but it was just so easy. And I said, there's Spotify and Apple and Pandora. There's so many places that you could have done that legally. And I said, Uncle Pat, would you walk into a store and steal something? And he goes, well, if it was as easy as like these 3 songs, of course I would. And I thought, so it's not about age. Here's my 91-year-old uncle who comes from a generation who have incredible values, I think. There's the saying, you can't compete with free, right? You can't compete with free. So our job is to educate, to talk about what it takes, how many years it takes. I think sometimes I say flippantly that people think we shot a movie in the backyard on our flip phone. I don't think they actually think that. But, I've been in the business 30 years and my mother has no idea what I do. So if our families don't know what we do, Richard Gladstein tells a story. Richard's the producer on a lot of the Tarantino movies as well as Cider House Rules and Finding Neverland. He said he gets on a plane and someone says to him, what do you do? And he said, I'm a producer. And they say to him, well, what's the difference between a producer and a director? And you understand that people don't know what we do. So I think we're a victim of 2 things. And I think this applies across the board with music and books and photography as well. We're a victim of whatever that version of red carpet celebrity is. People think that we're all wildly rich, enjoying parties, and in fact, no one understands the grueling time it takes to create anything, right? And the second is movie magic. And again, apply it to every discipline. Nobody has a clue. I often wonder if the names at the end of a movie, if people actually think that they're made up, imaginary, right? Because there's so many of them. So I think that we need to be more transparent about who we are, what we do. I think we need to be more inclusive, because the thing I really, truly do believe is that fans, audiences, make it possible for all of us to do what we do. That it is a very symbiotic relationship of creation and participation. And without both, it's like, what is it if like a bear shouts in the wood? No, I don't know. Like, who knows, right?
Yeah.
So you could create the most magnificent piece. If nobody was there to experience it, it doesn't matter. So I think that we as industries, as creative industries and communities, owe it. It's our, it's our obligation and responsibility to talk to audiences and tell them that they are part of this process. They make what we do real. And on the other hand, I also think that they need to know that this isn't, when they steal something, it's not 2 kids in a basement swapping files. These are criminal enterprises. These are people that make millions of dollars a year on piracy. It was funny, I was talking to a director at Sundance this year, and he was like, oh, who cares about pirating? I'm like, you're in the business! Talking about. And when I finally, I thought, it's just taken me a year, but I got him in the corner that night, and I said, do you understand that every time you pirate, you're putting money into the pockets of criminal enterprises. I said, you're not only stealing like whatever. Pirate sites make money. Pirate sites makes money one of two ways. They make it from advertising revenues from the ads that show up on those sites, and they make it from they actually have Netflix-type subscription services where they charge you $7.99 or $10.99 a month to watch this stuff. The average pirate site, I think, makes somewhere between $2 and $3 million a year.
Yikes.
Okay, that's better than my entire department, my organization. You know? And all they've done is either gone into a theater and do a cam rip, which is, you know, where they just film the show, and then once the legitimate digital copy comes out, they just rip that and they put it up online. So for me, it's like, and these are one of many verticals for criminal enterprises, from, you know, pirate sites to, you know, child pornography to, you know, human trafficking. And I'm not going to say that all criminal enterprises are that insidious, but they do go that deep. Mm-hmm. You know, it'll be kids. You know, it'll be a criminal enterprise. It's not kids. You know, young groups of people who rip these and sell them to pirate sites, and the pirate sites are making all this money. How is that okay?
Yeah, and we have the power to starve them, essentially.
Yes, and so our Follow the Money campaign is to do that, to say to legitimate brands, hey, you're buying digitally online. It's not regulated. You often don't know where your ads are going. Let's work together to figure that out. There's third-party companies that are called digital advertising assurance providers, and they track where your ads go. And so we encourage advertising agencies and the brands themselves to subscribe to these providers so that they can track their ad buys. Yeah. And if we manage to be successful across the board, we have done two things. We've restricted the cash flow profits to pirate sites. Some think it's as high as 50%. I even go with 25%. If 25% of the money coming to pirate sites stops, you know what? That's a significant chunk of money.
Yep.
The second thing is if legitimate brands aren't on those sites anymore, and the pirate site is left with porn ads, I call them Russian bride ads, and videos like, you know, how to get laid in 7 days, you know, video sales ads, then people going to those sites who end up at them accidentally, because, listen, there are people that pirate, and I don't know that we will ever change their minds. But although if I convinced one guy at Sundance, maybe I could do it across the world if I just had enough time. But if we've heard from parents that when they say they walk into their kid's bedroom and they see a kid online and they see major brands on a site, they assume that it's legitimate. If we can manage to get all the legitimate brands off these sites, then the parents are going to know where their kids are.
Yep.
You know? So that's what we need people to remember. They're not just stealing from like some big corporation. They're putting money into the pockets of criminals. And that's wrong.
For what it's worth, each year I get the Oscar screeners, which is a real privilege in my profession. Right. And I think once my wife said, you know, I'm going to take that screener to my friend's house. We want to watch it. I said, no. This is not leaving my house. Are you crazy? I know. And this is my wife who I trust. But that's
the thing. People don't understand. You know, we have, and I don't blame her. You know, it's just, listen, when my mother, who's in her 90s, knows the top grossing movie from the internet because she's watched Good Morning America, you know, you have a community of fans and audience members who think, hey, I should be able to watch that.
Yeah.
I just gotta go look, you know?
I just want to, given your deep roots within the independent film world, what's your take on it in 2017? I know you've written a column about different studios shuttering, you know, the other ones that have gone by the wayside in recent years. And yet now we have a pay-per-view model where I can watch any independent film via Comcast. And I would think that would be a great revenue stream. And then you have the blockbusters, the tentpoles, which kind of suck up all the atmosphere. Are you cautiously optimistic about independent filmmaking, or is it on shakier grounds than before?
Well, I think it's a bit on shakier ground because of piracy, and you know, the studios have huge content protection departments that do their notice and takedowns to get their movies off pirate sites. The independents don't have that kind of backup. Okay, so they do suffer a bit there. However, you look at the Oscars this year and you think, okay, the indies came into their own again, and that's cyclical, right? Because I can remember the year that I had Shine when I was running Fine Line. It was Shine and English Patient, and there was a Mike Leigh movie. I don't know, it was Secrets and Lies. They were all independent films that for the most part that were nominated that year. And so I look at the nominations and I think there's a chance. And there's a wonderful independent film company called A24, and they had Moonlight this year. And there's also, there's people that say Netflix and Amazon are tech companies, but the honest to God truth is Amazon had, has Manchester by the Sea, and Netflix has 13, the Ava DuVernay documentary. So we're starting to find players in this ecosystem that will help support it.
Yeah.
But I will go back to my previous statement that they are on shaky ground because piracy does affect them. And we need to be cognizant of, if we want a new generation of voices, we need to support them. We need to understand that as audience members, we participate in the success, because then we can have more.
Gotcha.
And that's important.
I've been eager to ask a question like this for a while now, because I haven't had a chance to talk to an insider like yourself. And it's about Hollywood, it's about politics, and it's about, in recent months, obviously, the stars have been very anti-President Trump, and we've heard speeches at the different award shows. And part of me thinks, of course they have the right to speak. This is, it's part of what makes this country great. And then another part of me says, wait a minute, aren't they hurting their brand if they're doing that? I mean, if I want to go see a Michael Shannon movie, and he's a great actor, yes. he just said something like, Trump voters are ready for the urn. And I just want to kind of get your reaction, because I want no one's silence, but I also think that artists may be hurting their own cause if they're speaking out in that sort of aggressive a fashion.
So, I didn't hear that Michael Shannon said that.
Yeah.
My only response to that is, oh dear.
That was my response too.
I have family members that are Trump voters, and I'm from Massachusetts, okay? And I have found, and I was talking to a friend in D.C. this morning about this, I have found that it doesn't matter what I say, about my feelings, about what's going on. They're on their side. And it's a tricky question that you asked, so thank you very much, Not. Because I do believe in freedom of speech. I do believe that people have the right. I mean, this is what this country was built on, right? So if Michael Shannon wants to say that, my only statement to him was, that's not going to make anyone listen to you, okay? And so separate and apart from the brand, if we want to begin to have a dialogue in this country, because we seem to have a remarkable schism between the parties and the beliefs, then we can't talk like that. We need to actually have two-sided conversations, right? Someone said we have to be able to sit down with people who we don't agree with and listen to what they say, as opposed to just lecture them, which is what we've been doing, right? And we have, as you know, we have some very arch conservatives in Hollywood, and we have some very liberal, liberal Democrats in this town. But listen, if Meryl Streep doesn't care about her brand, it is not for me to say anything. And I happen to think that she's wildly articulate. She is entitled to her point of view. And if she is not concerned about her brand, then I should not be, right? The only thing that I would say to anybody, including myself, having had these conversations with the likes of my Uncle Pat, that yelling at him doesn't help. Having a conversation, and I'm not very good at it, I must admit, but having a conversation where you say, why do you think that? Why do you feel that? And those are difficult conversations to have on any level. And
actually, your conversation with your uncle, I think, maybe gave you more insight, maybe than you wanted, but I think that was actually informative for the work that you do, your organization.
Yes, it is, because then you understand the bridges that you need to build.
Yep.
And I think it's the same in politics. Now, listen, I'm new to politics, and my politics are, meaning I'm new to politics in that what we do for a living, which is to try to convey to both audiences and to politicians alike that copyright protection is important, that it creates jobs, that it creates enormous revenues for this country, that I have to go to D.C. and we have to talk about that. Okay, and I have to stay in my lane and I have to talk about that because that is most important to me. Running this organization, it's the most important thing that we do as an organization, me and my people. So I feel like Mr. Smith goes to Washington. I don't. I'm really like, oh shucks, gee whiz, this is going to be easy. But it's all so complicated. And I would simply say to people that it's okay for you to say what you want to say, but you actually have to be willing to listen to the other side as well.
Gotcha. Before I let you go, like, two other questions I want to ask you. One is I want to ask what you're sort of reading or watching or listening to right now. But before that, are there any sort of Hollywood trends that you've spotted in recent months that you think maybe haven't gotten enough media attention? You have such a kind of unique voice or unique perspective on the industry. And I figure someone like yourself might kind of know what's going on or get a sense of things that are bubbling up that maybe the press in general hasn't really pounced on yet.
Well, it's interesting. They're starting to, and I think it's the introduction of Amazon and Netflix into the business. I think in the last couple of months, I've started to see articles like, "Oh, the movie industry is dead. The old model isn't going to work," and Amazon and Netflix are changing the game. But in some ways, I think they're changing it for the better because it's making people more responsive to the fact that, again, you want to watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it. And they're also helping to give voice to a lot of other storytellers that haven't had room for them, in the current marketplace. So I think you're going to see more voices. I mean, I don't know. The honest to God truth is, I have no idea when I'm going to watch all the TV shows I want.
Yeah, get in line.
I literally will have to be retired sitting like in a rocking chair, okay? Because there's so much interesting stuff. It's not all great, but it's all, I can't keep track of, I want to watch that. Oh, gee, I want to watch that Tom Hardy, the Taboo. Oh, I can't wait for, I looked at my TiVo last night. I was finally done around 11 o'clock last night with work, and I thought, I want to watch one show. And I have there was 11 hours of programming. And I'm like, well, I have 1 hour. One. Now I have 10 more, you know?
I get content guilt from that. There's so many choices, so much too much, but that's a good problem to have.
And also, by the way, it's not just in television, it's in movies. And I'm a huge iPad reader, so I have Kindle on my iPad. I have Apple, iBooks on my, and it's loaded with books. So at night, when I finally can't watch TV anymore because I literally can't keep my eyes open, I go to my bed, I open my mini iPad, and I start reading something because I have hundreds of books downloaded. And usually, by the way, I end up whapping my head on the top of my forehead when the iPad falls on my head as I have fallen dead asleep reading. So, it's like there's an overabundance, and I love that, in books and music. And I could, if I could just not have any sleep, I might catch up.
That's right. Well, on that note, what are you reading or watching that you kind of maybe want to point us to? Just things you've seen that you'd like to get a bigger audience for. And this could be an album, a book, anything.
Okay, well, no one's going to want my book choices. I happen to love science fiction, so I'm now reading the 10-book series of Girl in a Box. Okay. Everyone's going to think probably less of me, except for probably the author, but they're fantastic. They're sci-fi or kind of like near future with beta humans. Anyone says to me, "You read sci-fi?" I'm like, "I know, please." It's like a guilty pleasure, but I love it, and I have since college. But the television show that I love the most, and I am waiting for the final and third and final season to come on, is The Leftovers, which is based on a book, and it is an HBO show, and they're only doing 3 seasons. Damon Lindelof is the showrunner, and I find it to be extraordinary. It is the kind of TV, there are a lot of people that don't want to watch it. There are a lot of people that say, I watched 2 episodes or 3, and it's a little weird, and I don't understand it, and I'm like, it is fantastic. There are, when you get used to doing what we do for a living, right? You see movies, there's TV shows, there's a beginning, middle, and an end, there's 3 acts, whatever it happens to be, and this show just throws all of that out, and you're sitting on your television sofa, and you're thinking, they didn't just do that. Because it's like, like, they're sitting in a writer's room, and they're kind of, like, reinventing slightly the way you tell stories. I'm a huge fan of the show.
Excellent.
Huge.
Well, I imagine you have to kind of know the rules in order to break them, so I suspect the team behind the show gets how to make a story, but they're kind of reinventing things, so excellent.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, I would really highly recommend it. And then, listen, I just started watching Legion, which was another one that I don't know if you've seen. I'm 4 episodes behind on that, 3 episodes. It's an effects show, and it's extraordinary. It's based on a Marvel comic, but the first hour is surreal. I was kind of like looking at the television screen like when you watch a dog watch TV.
The head tilt.
I don't even know what's going on, but I'm going to still keep watching. There's amazing TV.
Yeah, it's a great time, that's for sure, and all the choices we have.
But also, I want to say it's an amazing time for independent film, right? And we just have to please remember, as audience members and fans, to make it a lot. Let it grow, let it thrive, support it. And by the way you can support independent film, if you don't get to see everything that comes out from the indie distributors, your local film festivals. Support your local film festivals. That's really important.
Yep. And then when you see a film, share it. Go on Facebook, go on Twitter. Tell people how good it is, and hey, look out for X or Y, because that helps too.
The other thing, I was going to say, and don't share the illegal link, please. But there's a website that one of our sister companies developed called wheretowatch.com. Mm-hmm. If you bookmark wheretowatch.com, it will give you every film and television show and where you can watch it legally.
Excellent.
So I'll do a little plug for Where to Watch.
Yeah, well, we'll put that in the show notes as well. And Ruth, thank you so much. I actually met Ruth briefly in Denver a couple of years ago, and I was just blown away by your speech at that event, and we kind of stayed in touch. So I'm glad you got a chance to talk to us again.
Thank you so much for allowing me to do this, Christian.
All right. The organization is creativefuture.org, an important mission and a very important voice in the industry. Thanks again, Ruth.
All right. Thanks, Christian.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.